The reporter from Melody Maker leaned forward in his chair, pen poised over his notepad, and asked the question that would haunt music history for decades. "Mr. Hendrix, what legacy do you want to leave behind?" It was October 15, 1968. The Savoy Hotel's conference room was packed with British music journalists who had come to interview Jimi Hendrix about his latest album, Electric Ladyland. Most expected the usual rock star responses: fame, fortune, perhaps something about changing the world through music. What they got instead was a prophecy so specific, so precise, that when it came true exactly 20 years later, music historians would call it one of the most eerily accurate predictions in rock history. Jimi paused for a moment, looking past the reporters toward the tall windows that faced the Thames. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made the room fall completely silent. "I want to be remembered for freeing the guitar from its cage." The journalists looked puzzled. What cage? What was he talking about? Jimi continued, his voice growing stronger. "Right now, guitarists play like they're in prison, following rules made by people who never felt music in their souls. There are things you're supposed to do, techniques you're not allowed to try, sounds you're not supposed to make." He picked up his guitar from the stand beside his chair. "But in 20 years," Jimi said, his fingers finding the strings, "every guitarist will play like the impossible is possible. They'll use techniques that don't exist yet, make sounds nobody's heard. Music will have no borders, no 'you can't do that' moments. The guitar will become what it was meant to be, unlimited." The room was silent. Several reporters exchanged glances. This sounded like hippie philosophy, not a serious answer about musical legacy. But Jimi wasn't finished. "I can see them now," he said, his eyes distant. "Guitarists who will play so fast it sounds like machines, others who will make the guitar weep like a human voice or scream like a jet engine. Some will play with hammers instead of picks. Others will make the strings sing without even touching them." A reporter from the NME shifted uncomfortably. "That sounds rather impossible, Mr. Hendrix." Jimi smiled. "That's exactly what I mean. Right now, people think it's impossible. In 20 years, it'll be Tuesday afternoon." What the journalists in that room couldn't know was that they were witnessing history. Not just the interview of a famous guitarist, but a moment of genuine prophecy. And in exactly 20 years, every word Jimi spoke would prove to be not just accurate, but conservative. The press conference had been arranged to promote Electric Ladyland, but it quickly became something more profound. The British music press had always been skeptical of American rock imports, viewing them as flashy but lacking substance. They expected to catch Jimi in contradictions, to expose him as another loud American with more volume than vision. Instead, they found themselves listening to someone who spoke about music like a philosopher, who saw the future of guitar playing with startling clarity. "Mr. Hendrix," asked a reporter from Record Mirror, "aren't there physical limitations to what can be done with 6 strings?" "Only in the minds of people who think limitations exist," Jimi replied. "The guitar isn't 6 strings, it's infinite possibility waiting for someone brave enough to explore it." He demonstrated by playing a brief passage that seemed to come from 3 guitars at once, melody, rhythm, and bass, all flowing from his single instrument. "See, that's what I mean. People think the guitar can only do one thing at a time, but that's just because we've been taught to think inside a very small box." Richard Williams from Melody Maker pressed further. "But surely there are techniques that simply cannot be mastered by human hands." Jimi's answer would prove to be one of the most prophetic.
"However many it takes to express what the guitarist feels," Jimi answered seriously. "I've imagined guitars with 7 strings, 8 strings, 12 strings, not just more of the same, but tuned to create possibilities that don't exist yet." The laughter stopped. Something in Jimi's voice made it clear he wasn't joking. "And the sounds," Jimi continued, his voice taking on an almost mystical quality. In 20 years, guitarists will make sounds that don't exist in nature. They'll use electronics to stretch and bend their music into dimensions that haven't been discovered yet. They'll make the guitar sound like it's crying, laughing, screaming, whispering secrets. Margaret Simpson from Rolling Stone UK asked, "How can you be so specific about something so far in the future?" Jimi looked at her for a long moment. "Because I can see the prison walls that exist now, and I can see exactly where they're going to crack." The rest of the press conference continued with more conventional questions about touring, recording techniques, and influences. But the journalists who were there would later say that the room had changed after Jimi's prophecy, as if everyone present understood they had witnessed something significant, even if they couldn't quite grasp what it was. When the official interview ended, several reporters lingered, asking follow-up questions about Jimi's predictions. "Do you really believe all of this will come to pass?" asked a young journalist from Sounds magazine. "I don't believe it. I know it. Because the future is already here in some people's hearts. They just haven't found their instruments yet." The articles that appeared in the following weeks were mixed. Some focused on Jimi's musical achievements and upcoming tours. Others mentioned his unusual predictions about the future of guitar playing, with varying degrees of skepticism. Most dismissed his prophecies as the grand statements of a young artist drunk on success and 1960s optimism. They were wrong. The timeline of Jimi's prophecy unfolded with eerie precision. In 1974, just 4 years later, Ritchie Blackpearl of Deep Purple was already pushing guitar speed to new limits, but this was just the beginning. In 1975, Eddie Van Halen emerged from Pasadena with a technique that seemed impossible, using both hands on the fretboard to create sounds no one had heard before. Two-handed tapping, exactly as Jimi had predicted. By 1980, Yngwie Malmsteen was playing classical compositions on electric guitar at speeds that seemed inhuman. Machine-like was exactly how critics described his technique. In 1982, Michael Hedges, with
The speed he predicted, achieved by dozens of players. The two-handed techniques, standard curriculum in music schools. The orchestral sounds, common in both rock and acoustic genres. The electronic dimensions, the foundation of entire musical genres. The extended range instruments, manufacturing standards. Most remarkably, the magazine interviewed several of the guitarists who had made these impossible techniques reality. Without exception, they cited Jimi Hendrix as their primary inspiration. Eddie Van Halen, "Jimi showed us that the only rules were the ones we accepted. Everything I do comes from seeing him break those walls down." Steve Vai, "When I heard Jimi's music, I realized the guitar was just waiting for someone to set it free. He gave us permission to try anything." Joe Satriani, "Jimi didn't just predict the future of guitar, he created it by showing us that impossible was just another word for not yet attempted." The magazine concluded, "In 1968, Jimi Hendrix looked 20 years into the future and described exactly what guitar playing would become. Not approximately, exactly. Every technique, every innovation, every breakthrough he predicted has not only occurred, but has become fundamental to modern guitar education." But perhaps the most prophetic aspect of Jimi's 1968 prediction was his statement about the guitar being freed from its cage. By 1988, guitar techniques that would have seemed impossible in 1968 were being taught in high school music programs. The barriers between classical, jazz, rock, and experimental music had largely dissolved. The guitar had indeed become unlimited in exactly the way Jimi had envisioned. Margaret Simpson, the Rolling Stone UK journalist who had asked Jimi how he could be so specific, wrote a follow-up article in 1988. 20 years ago, I thought I was listening to the romantic fantasies of a young musician. Instead, I was witnessing one of the most accurate predictions in music history. Jimi Hendrix didn't just foresee the future of guitar, he created it by giving guitarists permission to imagine it. The recording of that 1968 press conference became one of the most studied documents in music education, not for its technical content, but for its demonstration of how an artist can see possibilities that others consider impossible.
Today, music historians consider Jimi's 1968 legacy prophecy to be one of the most remarkably accurate predictions in artistic history. Not because he was psychic, but because he understood that the only limitations on musical expression were the ones musicians accepted. The cage he spoke of wasn't made of physics or human capability, it was made of assumptions. And once he showed that those assumptions could be broken, every guitarist who came after him had permission to try anything. In freeing the guitar from its cage, Jimi Hendrix didn't just predict the future of music, he created it. If this story of artistic vision becoming prophetic reality inspired you, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who refuses to accept limitations on their creativity. Have you ever made a prediction that seemed impossible but came true? Tell us about it in the comments. And don't forget to hit that notification bell for more stories about the moments when visionaries saw tomorrow with perfect clarity.